Spent some time on the weekend, came back in, and I've been building up some layers. Starting to see kind of challenging things emerging, which is really good. It's really good to work with. So very colourful again, finally, and trying to push these interactions. So, and there was a very gentle kind of undulation. Well, I overlaid this sort of blue-grey in a deeper curve. And so what you get then, it pulls out these sort of beautiful shapes here, these forms as a visual rhythm that you can read across like this. This is the original one over here, and how that one is going. I mean, it's quite subtle in terms of how it's rising off the canvas, but I do like how the texture is becoming more complex as it rises. So it's starting to, the layer beneath is starting to push forward and to accumulate. I'd like to control it a little bit better, or decontrol it maybe. Without the monochromatic thing, I'm not sure that this open canvas works. I definitely think, as you see over here, the white works when you have a section of white, and it could be the same case here. I mean, I like to use white as a color rather than as a background. It feels good to start to see a lot of colors pushing and pulling against one another. Yeah, so I feel like there's quite a lot that I can do here at the moment. It's that aspect of time I need to take into consideration. I can't really rush ahead with this. I mean, in terms of layering. Tuesday morning. It's great. It's great to be back in the colors, building up some beautiful texture. With some pieces, I'm certain that they are not close to where I'd like them to be, and other pieces are close. So let me start with this one actually. Finally, I decided against this white canvas, or actually it was the unprimed canvas, and then I made it white, and then finally I gave it a color. Look at that texture here. Like, I mean, that's really something there. Like, what I started to do was to adjust the volumes so that the surface layer would be broken, so that you could start to read through. And in some cases you can read like 3 or 4 layers down. I mean, I love this. Like, look at this. Gives me a lot of hope, I suppose. Gives me a lot of ideas. Intentionally creating these breaks in these layers of paint and trying to emphasize these sort of curves and how they will interact through different levels. I've been working on quite a lot of things at the same time, sort of bouncing energy from one to the next. I'm loving what's happening here with this sort of kind of string effect almost. Yeah, I mean, there's certain things I'm doing, and there's certain points that I'm manipulating it and allowing it to mix and to not mix. One thing, again, this is a throwback to the earlier work, which I think I'm going to abandon, is then you get this block of color here, which doesn't appear anywhere else on the canvas. So I just don't think that works. I think I need to get rid of this. Add another layer on top there, and the texture is becoming increasingly more kind of granular, I suppose, which is really into that one. When I step out of here and come back in, it's like, wow, there's quite a lot happening. I've been working non-stop for so long. Now I feel like I'm on the edge. Now I feel like a lot of things can collapse here. And already I can see things are sort of teetering. They're kind of going towards oblivion. And there's other things which are holding their own, like they're standing their ground, and they're quite substantial. So spending so much time with these kinds of structures that now I'm starting to be able to, I wouldn't say control, but to lead in a certain direction. So to think in a different way, and how to combine these and how to make them work against one another or work with one another. Hello, Abby. I prefer this broken texture so that you can actually penetrate through all these layers. There's a beautiful sort of a decay of frequency or degradation happening. I mean, you start with something that's solid, and then each layer, so even looking at the top, like how solid that line is, and as you come inwards, the signal starts to fade and decay entirely in the center where we have actually holes here. So yeah, beautiful language developing here. All in all, yeah, those kinds of there's a spider there who I thought I killed by accident, but it looks like he's okay there. It seems like he's still functioning. Very good for him. Come on, girl. I finished a collaboration project with a French artist, and he's based in Marseille. Turned out really well. I'm quite pleased with the result. Harry, take it easy, pal. Harry. I think the thing that I found most difficult about lockdown, about all of this, is the conversations, is the dialogues with other artists, with other creatives. It always seemed to me they were so natural and unforced that you just happen to meet somebody for a coffee and then the conversation will go that way. You don't just bump into artists now, or at least I don't. And there's also the human side that I quite miss, that, because you do spend a lot of time in solitude. How do you manage the sort of human side of things? The need to be with other people, the need to socialize, and to, of course, for me to take in all these new influences, to take in concerts and to take in exhibitions, and travel for me is really difficult. I'm generally quite restless, and I had planned to travel from San Francisco to Anchorage overland, take about a month, stopping off along the way, and of course that was quashed. I'm going to do a much shorter version, probably here in Ireland, before the weather changes completely. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to go, but let's go this way. I'd love to feel that sensation of movement, of open road, of forests and valleys and the ocean, and certainly I think something that I will do by myself, so it shouldn't have too much of an effect on regarding social distancing or whatever, but just planning it out in my mind. So let's see. Thursday here. This morning I found a crow on the lawn. Anyway, so what am I doing? One thing that's prevalent in all of this current work is the idea of accumulation and building up layers. So it's layers of time and layers of material, and the two things are sort of interwoven here. So the details in these pieces are on a quite large scale. So I began to think about the smaller scale again, and perhaps I can marry the two together. So, for example, this is on a much finer level. I mean, there's so much detail in here. And another one here. Again, I just masked up the sides just to give it a cleaner read. I suppose you could predict, I love this texture. I love this kind of irregularity on the surface, and how this is going to cast shadows and catch the highlights. And I wonder if there's any place for these kind of super fine details with something like this, when it calls you in to investigate these kinds of things here. And this, where you get this, you can see the lines in the canvas, you can feel the texture of the canvas here, these sort of jagged accumulations, and how that will work over time. It would just bring an extra dimension that would kind of call you in to the very finer details, and then from afar you still get sort of a consistent read on what's happening. Food for thought here at the moment. What is this, Friday? So stretched the smaller canvas this morning and worked up a surface and a palette. It has that very granular texture, which I think is quite nice. And once it dries down, I think it's going to catch. I mean, it's quite deep in places, and that's really going to trap the shadows, trap the light in there. Closed up the canvas of one of these 4 bars of paint pieces. It's quite light, spacious, I think. So I left this sort of irregular surface. And I really like how you can read these colors through these different layers. So, I mean, you can pick out some green, some yellow. Some pieces with another layer, it starts to feel more kind of substantial, and so that works. But other pieces, I recognize the moment that I have since passed, that obviously I can't return to. But that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm trying to find that moment and sort of poise this painting right on the edge of that moment, insofar as possible. It's almost like locking in this kinetic energy in the surface, because you're starting wet and then it dries, and it's in this sort of, it's on the border of these two states of this wet and dry idea, and so it's full of potential, I think. To me, the painting is successful if it can stand by itself. If you remove it from this context, if you remove it, take it away from me and all of my talking and ideas and just place it there. And does the painting have its own life? Does it have its own substance? And that's not really for me to say. I mean, obviously I try to guide it in that direction, but yeah, it's not always guaranteed. I mean, there's one on the table here. It's horrendous. Oof. Yeah, it's kind of staring back at me like a bad hangover, just like it won't go away. But that's part of it too. I mean, I might attack it again and see if I can bring it in another direction. But it's been a good week. It's been a substantial week. I've sort of bounced back and forth between different paintings, different ideas. Always I'm sort of gathering practical knowledge as I go, photographing, I'm documenting, taking notes and so on, with a view to refining what I'm doing and just carrying it forward. Also next week, Wednesday, I have a workshop. Looking forward to that. It's some drawing and some printmaking from observations of nature. In so much as possible, I will try to document something. But my preference is to be absorbed and to be fully attentive to what I'm doing rather than documenting what I'm doing. So whatever the case, I'll certainly share the creations that come out of this workshop. On that note, I'm going to leave it there. As always, take care of your mind. Have a lovely weekend, and I shall see you next week.